1, 2, 3, 4. Blah, 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 blah.
Where's the singing?
Singing?
Sing.
No, I am not going to
Jerome, do
sing.
you sing?
La, 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 la.
From Orlando at Flight Sim Expo 2019, I am joined by Stefan Schaefer and Jerome Zimmerman from Pilots. And I've really wanted to interview you for so long because you've been around for a very long time. Your products are insanely popular, which I'm sure you're aware. And I think what a lot of your fans and your customers probably are not aware is what is your history and the history of Pilots. So we're gonna have a little bit of a history lesson. Okay. Now, many people may not know you're a real-world pilot. You're in Austria.
Yes, that's correct. Austria, yeah.
You're in Austria, and you have your own aircraft. What do you fly?
I own a Piper Aero 3, yes.
Yes. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to the inception of Pilots. Let's talk about your first product and what led you there.
Well, going back to in the history, this would mean to go back to 1992.
Wow.
1994, around that, because then I had the first contact with Flight Simulator, which was Flight Simulator 4 at that time. There was also another product called Designer, and I started to design small aircraft like A310 Austrian Airlines and try to sell that on shareware base, but actually I never sold a single one.
Wow.
Probably it was that good, so no one could really fly it. Later, when FS5 came out, we started to build a Hong Kong scenery because I always liked the old Hong Kong approach.
Yeah, Kai Tak.
And yes, Kai Tak. And this was actually the first product, and I uploaded it as not even a shareware; it was a freeware. And then people started to tell me, "Well, it's that good.
You should
try to sell it."
Yeah.
And I remember myself sitting in my kitchen and putting floppy disks into packages and sending them off to the vendors.
Yeah.
And this eventually got us the money to produce a CD version of it.
Yep.
And well, that's it's like a drug. You get
You're
addicted.
hooked.
Yes,
You're
you're hooked or you get addicted. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And those are the first steps.
So those are the first steps, and that was around 94. And then
Yes.
let's lead to your first modern product. Was that FS Global? Because I believe you
Yes,
started, was that like
in
2002 or 2004?
No, not really. But there was a flat FS Global in 1998.
Oh, I
Also
didn't
for
know that.
FS5.
Okay.
It was produced by Just Flight back then. We had a big box with a flashlight on
Those were
on
the
top.
days.
So it was in the shelves and it flashed
Yeah.
to attract people. It was rather no mesh scenery because it wasn't possible back then, but it was more some kind of land class. It gave you land class and vector. It gave you very accurate coastlines and very accurate land class for FS5.
Yeah.
And
So-
there was also an Airbus in between there somewhere.
Oh, wow.
Yes, we also
Because
did
many
Airbus
people
product.
don't realize that Pilots actually, back then, I mean, now we're showcasing the B314 that
Which I can't wait for.
is almost ready.
Yeah.
And people think this is the first, well, we did a previous installment of the B314, but people think that, oh, okay, Pilots is really all about weather, MASH, and some scenery, but, I mean, Stefan, I think, if I'm not wrong, you did the first ever Airbus for
yes,
Flight
we
Sim.
did,
Flight
yeah,
Simulator.
2000,
Yeah.
2000, yes.
Wow. It's amazing.
A series of Airbus with different liveries and
Yeah.
scenery of Toulouse. But,
And then we jumped to FS 2004, and is that where things really start to get pretty big with like FS Global, or?
yes, at the moment we could we had actually mesh scenery possible. We started to do the mesh scenery like FS Global,
Yeah.
derived from back then SRTM NASA
Yep.
project Earth scannings.
Yep.
And but at the current version of FS Global, there is nearly no more SRTM in, because we got better data from various other sources like LIDAR data, radar data, etc., etc., and the resolution got much better. We could actually compile a much better resolution version, but the ultimate version already has 80 gigabytes.
Yeah,
and
huge.
it's already very huge.
Yeah.
But there is some potential for future versions if the machines can do
Handle
it,
the
and
data.
and also if there will be simulators who can show and render the data.
So when you're creating or developing something like FS Global, how do you take all that data and compile it into something that Flight Simulator can deconstruct and then recreate in the simulation environment? Like, how does that work?
Well, there is every.
We could tell you, but then we'd have to shoot you.
Is that the secret? Is that the secret sauce?
Not really. But
and all the others watching. No, there's a special format of the data, and it's converted, and we have special algorithms to get rid of errors, data errors, or sharpen the data much better than it actually is.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the ultimate version at the Alps, you have really sharp edges and ridges, which really look like reality, whereas others have very rounded edges, etc.
Right.
And
There's also,
that's our bigger asset.
I think there's also a certain level of cleanup. Not all the data we have is perfect, so you have to
Perfect.
go in
Exactly,
there.
that's what I meant by
and that's,
error
there's
correction.
a lot of work to actually. I mean, it's any. I would compare it, for people to understand it better. If you have satellite data out there, I mean, there's going to be clouds somewhere on the satellite imagery, and you're going to have to make sure that the overlapping tiles, the color matches, the clouds are out, and the same way when you have mesh data, there's going to be inconsistencies where, for whatever reason, at that precise moment, there was a dip in the data, and you're going to have to reconstruct that in the mesh to smooth it out, etc.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Wow. So obviously it's a lot of work. How many people are on the team that's developing it and working on it, and how long does it take to develop something like FS Global Ultimate?
Well, it depends on the product.
Yeah.
We have various teams, and not every team member works on every product. So FS Global, it depends on how much time the developer can invest, because most of them are not full-time developers. They have a day job, and therefore it can take a week or it can take 6 months.
Depends.
So
If it's just
it
an
really much
update
depends
or,
on how large the project is.
Right.
Like something like FS Global, it takes half a year about to develop from raw data.
So to develop FS Global Ultimate, from the moment you decide we're going to the next stage, we're doing an Ultimate now, from the moment you have that idea to release, it's about 6 months.
Yeah,
For the
you could
entire
say that.
globe.
Yes, you could see.
Wow.
You could say that. Yeah.
I don't know why, but for some reason it just seems like it's so much more significant than that. I mean, you've got.
Well, don't forget that we have experience and knowledge of previous versions. We're not starting from ground zero.
So are there elements that come from those other versions that help?
The installer, the way data is put into the sim, the directories, the folders, the structures. I mean, there is a similarity there. We're not starting, as I said, we're not reinventing the wheel. We have experience, we have data, we have installers.
Especially when it comes to the FS Global Mesh, not the whole globe will be in new data. So we just have certain spots, certain areas, certain continents, certain countries where we get new high resolution data, and that is woven into the existing scenery.
Wow. Okay.
And people have to remember, of course, we talk about global data, but if you have countries like Holland that are inherently, flat, there aren't that many hills.
Right. So it's not very complex.
So, Holland wouldn't be one of the areas that has really fresh, great new data, because it's not that interesting for mesh.
Right.
We're talking about the Alps, the Himalayas, the Rift Valley in Africa, really interesting areas of the world that, have unique landmarks associated with mesh.
Right. So you don't necessarily cover the entire globe, but certain specific areas that.
Well, we cover it, but I mean, we don't cover it in a high density. I mean, there wouldn't be anything to
Right.
really.
There's not much data to really to
Yes.
read
Yes.
from a mesh
Exactly.
perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why we have different levels of detail depending on country and area, because as Jerome has said, it doesn't make sense to have a very high
Yeah.
resolution for Holland or other flat countries, because flat is flat.
Yeah.
And we always get the question, what is your level of detail in the scenery? It really doesn't tell you anything.
Right.
And of course, it doesn't tell you, if I tell you it's rendered in this LOD, it again doesn't tell you anything, because you need to ask the question, what is the level of detail of the sewer starter?
Right.
Because I can always render a sewer starter of 90 meters resolution into 14 meters.
Yeah. So let's talk about Orbix a little bit, because you've done a little bit of work with Orbix in the past with Vector.
Yes.
Talk about Vector a little bit.
Well, Vector is, how shall I say, Vector is coastlines and Vector scenery streets, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And the real approach we wanted to have in Vector is the elevation correction for all the airports.
Yeah.
Because in Microsoft used for airport elevation the highest point within the airport area, and now we have the problem that we have flat airports.
Yeah.
So when it comes to thresholds, the threshold should might not be at the elevation of the airport elevation. And so I thought the correct approach would be to get the average of every threshold elevation,
Right.
and make that the airport elevation, because then in that case you would correct all errors, all possible errors, to a minimum.
Right.
This is very important, like Cairo, for instance, where you have threshold elevation differences of 500 feet. To be able to fly certain envelopes in real elevation, you need to reduce the error as low as possible, to the lowest
And
version.
is it something that you're still actively working on or updating, or is that pretty much a finished project?
Actually, Orbix has purchased the intellectual property of the
So
current
they're
version.
developing it.
So they are developing, which does not mean we don't do anything in this area.
I see.
Again.
All right, now we're going to shift gears, because there's more to pilots and FS Global. That's probably your most well-known product, but you're doing sceneries and
Yes.
aircraft now.
Yes.
Let's talk about sceneries.
Mm-hmm.
You have Almeria and Alicante,
Yeah, that's
right?
correct,
Are those
yeah.
the only two so far, or
Yes, these are the only two so far released, but Santiago de Compostela and another Spanish airport is in the works and should be out in a month or two, we hope. And then we have shifted into other areas, like small island east of Malaysia called Tioman Island. I like this island very much because it has a similar approach in like Hong Kong used to be, Kai Tak. Though on a very low base, but you still have to make a curve into the airport, and then you are committed, because at the end of the runway you have a mountain. So you
and there's no go around, I don't think,
there's
there,
no
right?
go around.
Yeah.
Not for large aircraft. I mean,
Not
if
for
you
large
have-
aircraft.
If you
But
have
the-
an amphibian aircraft, you could just veer over to the right, land in the sea. But
But the largest aircraft was some STOL aircraft who could land and take off from there.
a Dash 7, right?
Dash
Yeah,
7, that's
yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
That was the largest aircraft able to fly.
And are all three sceneries from the same developer?
No, they aren't.
No, they aren't, no, yeah.
Well, actually, the Spanish airports are from the same developer, but for Tioman we have
An external, new one.
another new external
Very
developer.
great young talent.
Yes,
Like
yes.
very great young talent that we hope, to work with in the future too.
Yeah. Well, I've seen it in the headset here, and it's a stunning scenery. And I didn't know where I was, but I was like, wait a minute, is this something new? Have I seen this before? I really wasn't sure what I was looking at, but it was quite amazing.
Yeah.
So quite a bit of a diversification now for pilots.
Yes.
Let's talk about that airplane that I want.
Okay, which airplane are you meaning?
Is there more than one?
Well, we will see. But
okay.
currently we can speak about one.
Yes.
That's the Boeing 314 Clipper. Vintage aircraft from the 30s or 40s. The first aircraft with personal
Pan Am.
It was built for Pan Am.
But they didn't take
Actually,
delivery, right?
I'm sorry.
Did they ever take delivery of it?
Yes, of course.
They did,
They
yeah.
had. Only 12 aircraft have been built
Right.
of this aircraft. of this aircraft type.
Yeah.
And it was eventually a B314A version, which was then delivered to British Overseas Aircraft, so three
BOAC,
British,
yeah.
BOAC.
Yeah.
And 9 were flown by Pan Am. And it was the first aircraft which made it possible for traveling persons across the Atlantic. So they flew from
Yeah.
Bodwood to Foynes in the mouth of Shannon. And actually, there's a story about that. They sent off Charles Lindbergh
Yeah.
for searching for a proper place to land for them. And he eventually chose the mouth of the River Shannon, Foynes. And so they made it the station for entering and exiting Europe. Yes.
Wow, that's just so amazing.
Yep.
The external model obviously looks complete. It's a beautiful plane. I'm looking at it here on your banner. How far along in development? When might we finally be able to fly it home?
I think we will be ready in a month or two with this.
That's pretty close.
Basically, everything is done. Even the VC is essentially done. What we're really doing now is texturing, PBR, and when you look at the B314 compared to, let's say, an A320 cockpit, it's more than just a cockpit. I always say it's a real big flight deck, like several rooms, if you like, that are linked to each other, where you have
the radio room and
engineer station that for the flight engineer who takes care of the engines, and they all actually have to work in sync to get the aircraft to function and get airborne. So this is going to be a study level sim, and for us as well as a developer, it's challenging to bring such a complex aircraft, not complex in the way you think of an A320 with all the high fidelity electronics and everything, but complex in that you have a team flying the aircraft and making this available in a VC environment that is usable with certain interfaces as well that connect to each other for the virtual pilot.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, speaking of the virtual cockpit,
you have some pictures for
I
us.
have already some very exclusive
some exclusive shots here.
Shots,
yeah.
and can you get the microphone for a moment, and I will show you. So you have seen the cockpit in itself on the first picture, and then the flight engineer station and the overall view of the cockpit. It's like that's why they called it a clipper. It's like a ship. They did celestial navigation by opening the hatch, etc., etc. So it was very, very basic back then. But we will also deliver the gyropilot, which was a very, very early autopilot. For keeping distance, for keeping altitude and keeping direction.
Yeah.
So people will still be able to make a transatlantic crossing in 24 hours and go to sleep in between. It'll stay on course. It'll stay on course.
Yeah. We have a lot of nostalgic pilots that are going to love to recreate flights like that. And I could see myself doing a lot of the South American routes as well from way back in the day. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to fly that.
It's basically,
and it'll be fully modeled throughout the entire fuselage, or will it just be the virtual cockpit, or will you be able to use like
interior? There's tables, desks. You'll be able to see
every cabin. Every cabin will be modeled.
You'll be able to do your own virtual B314 tour.
That's going to be so much fun.
Yes, you just have to see for the catering yourself.
Yeah. So, Stefan, is there anything else that you might want your fans to know about pilots, or anything else that you might be working on, or?
Well, actually, that's our timeline for this year. Of course, we still have plans.
We have
coming up.
We delved into the X-plane market with Almeria. There hasn't been that much interest from the X-plane community. I personally have started using X-plane more and more, specifically for GA flying. I think there are some inherently amazing aircraft that have come to us in the last 6 months. One of my favorites at the moment is the TBM 900. which I think, especially if you're using VR, is just crazily well done. And we're exploring smaller airports.
Yeah.
That I think, I don't know, as someone like Stefan, we both fly in the real world. We both enjoy that tremendously. And when you fly in the real world, you know, anybody can cruise along at 6,000 feet in a small aircraft and you know, look at the landscape below. But having a challenging approach is that's always just amazing. You know, to land at an airport that has something incredibly unique about specifically the approach, and you know, of course, if it has an interesting approach like Tioman does, it's going to have a relatively interesting takeoff. So, you know, as I said, approach is always going to be, at least to me, more challenging, more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I speak for everyone when I say we're really looking forward to the future of what
you.
Pilots is going to be delivering.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
See, that wasn't so hard.
Once you get it talking,
I see.